the various ratios that are used in association with accounts receivable. So we will look at the acid test ratio, accounts receivable turnover ratio, and days sales and receivables, and how we can use those ratios to evaluate business performance. And so balance sheet information or data is useful because they show the relationship among assets, liabilities, and revenues. And so, like I said, we're going to use the acid test, accounts receivable turnover, and days sales and receivable ratios to do some analysis of our financial statements. The acid test, or quick ratio, is used to measure the company's ability to pay its current liabilities. And so in a previous chapter, we used the current ratio to do something similar, except now the quick ratio is more stringent because we're looking at the ability to pay our liabilities with quick assets or highly liquid assets. And so the quick assets include cash, cash equivalents, short-term investments, and net current receivables. So the higher the acid test ratio, the more able the business is to pay its current liabilities. And if you stop and think about why somebody would want to look at this as opposed to just the current ratio, the current ratio would include all of our current assets, but that doesn't mean that we're likely to turn them and be able to use those to pay current liabilities. For example, office supplies is included as a current asset, but it's not very likely that we're going to sell our office supplies and use those to pay our current liabilities. So when we look at this quick ratio, we're getting a better picture of how likely it is that we could pay our current liabilities if they all came due immediately. And so in general, an acid test of 1 or higher is considered safe. But of course, the acceptability depends on the industry, and we also need to consider past performance, as we've discussed. So this gives us an example for Amazon as of December 31st, 2018. And so the acid test ratio is the cash and cash equivalents plus short-term investments plus net current receivables, all divided by total current liabilities. And so they gave us the numbers for Amazon with a result of 85 cents. And so that means that for every $1 of current liabilities that Amazon has, they have 85 cents of quick assets available to pay that liability. The accounts receivable turnover is a measure of the number of times the company collects the average accounts receivable balance in a year. So the higher that number, that means the faster the cash collections are happening. It's calculated as our net credit sales divided by average net accounts receivable. And so remember that the average is the beginning plus the ending divided by 2. And so in this example, the accounts receivable turnover is 15.6. And so we can then infer from that they're collecting typically in less than 30 days because they're obviously collecting more than just 12 times per year. Finally, we have the days sales and receivables. And so it indicates how many days it takes to collect the average level of accounts receivable, sometimes also called the collection period. And so it should be close to the number of days customers are allowed to make payment when credit is extended. So for example, if we extend credit on a 30-day basis and that number is 45, that would be concerning because that means a lot of our customers aren't paying in the 30 days that we're asking them to, and it's taking us an extra 15 days to collect typically. So the shorter the collection period, the more quickly the organization is collecting and the sooner we can use our cash, and so that would of course be the goal. And so the days sales and receivable is calculated as 365 days divided by the accounts receivable turnover ratio. And so that shows us in this example where Amazon had accounts receivable turnover ratio of 15.6, it converts to 23 days. And so that means on average, it takes Amazon 23 days to collect its accounts receivable. And so if they have a 30-day credit limit, that's not a bad thing, because we're typically collecting before that 30 days comes up, and most people aren't pushing it past that. Of course, even then, the smaller the number, the fewer days, the better that is for the company.